talking nutrition for triathletes. Not fads, not extremes, but what actually works across training, prep, race day and recovery.
And importantly, how nutrition supports training rather than becoming another stressor. Because most mistakes we see aren't on race day, they start weeks earlier.
We'll keep this practical, evidence-based and relevant whether you're racing sprint distance, 70.3 or full Ironman. Each part has different goals. Don't use one strategy everywhere. Training nutrition should match the goal of the session. It sounds obvious, but it's where most athletes go wrong. For low intensity aerobic sessions, the goal is simple: perform the session and protect the adaptations.
And that means not turning easy days into moderate ones by underfueling and then dragging yourself through them. Polarised training only works if easy stays easy, internally as well as externally.
So for our low intensity, our aerobic base, we need to perform the session and protect the adaptations. Moving into our VO2 and threshold sessions, we want to hit the targets. We need to reduce our strain and practice our race fueling. Polarised training only works if the easy stays easy internally.
A rough guide we use with athletes is for easy sessions under 60 minutes or up to 90 often require minimal carbs. Moderate or longer sessions, we're looking to consume between 30 and 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, and on our longer or harder sessions, we're potentially looking at 60 to 90 grams per hour.
And that higher end isn't just about performance. It's about reducing strain, improving consistency, and actually being able to hit quality later in the week. So gut training. This is where people underestimate nutrition. Gut training is a real adaptation. If you're only ever taking fuel on race day, your gut hasn't been trained to absorb it, especially under stress.
So race day GI issues are really usually training day mistakes. In training, nutrition is about more than just fueling. It's about learning what your gut can handle under different conditions. That's why we encourage our athletes to use training sessions to experiment with different fuel forms. You could have sports drinks, gels, chews, or even some real food.
And sports drinks are a great foundation because they combine hydration and carbohydrates. But the concentration matters. If you make it too strong, you're asking for GI problems.
Gels are efficient and easy to dose, but they're not magic. They need fluid alongside them, and not everybody tolerates large numbers of gels well.
Chews and gummies can work nicely for some athletes because they're slow intake down, but they're harder to use at the higher intensities. Whereas real food definitely has a place, especially on long, easy rides, but as intensity increases, digestion becomes a limitation.
The key takeaway for training is this: variety is useful here. Training is where you find out what works and what doesn't work.
Alright, today we're going to tackle a supplement that usually gets associated with gym bros and power athletes, but actually has some interesting relevance for triathletes.
Yeah, so creatine has been misunderstood in endurance sports for years. It's not about getting bulky, it's about supporting performance, recovery, and resilience during training.
So in this quick segment, we'll explain what creatine is, when it might help triathletes, and why it can be particularly useful for female athletes.
Creatine is a naturally occurring compound stored in your muscles. Its main job is to help regenerate ATP, which is the energy your body uses for short, high-intensity efforts.
So we're thinking sprint finishes, short climbs, surges out the corners, or pushing over the top of the hill. Even in endurance racing, those moments really matter.
It's also important to understand that creatine isn't just about peak power. It can support training quality, strength development, and recovery between sessions.
For triathletes, creatine isn't about turning you into a sprinter. It's about supporting the demands of your training. It can help with repeated high-intensity efforts, support strength and conditioning work in the gym, and may even help reduce muscle damage during your heavy training blocks.
And interestingly, research suggests that female athletes may benefit even more. That's partly because women typically have lower baseline creatine stores to start with, and supplementation may support muscle strength, bone health, and potentially fatigue resistance, which are areas that can be especially important for long-term performance.
It's worth saying, you might see a small increase in your body mass due to the water stored in the muscle, but for most athletes that's minimal and often outweighed by the training benefits from consuming creatine.
And like everything we talk about, it's not essential, but for some triathletes, especially during strength phases or heavy training periods, it can be a useful tool.
It's also really valuable during our strength and conditioning phases. Creatine can help improve strength and power development, which supports our running economy and overall resilience.
Another benefit of creatine is in recovery. Research suggests that creatine may help reduce muscle damage and support glycogen replenishment when combined with carbohydrate. This is useful during heavy training blocks.
If you're considering using creatine, the good news is it's simple. 3 to 5 grams per day is effective, you don't need to have a load-in phase prior, and consistency is what matters. It can be taken any time, but pairing it with a meal or recovery nutrition can help uptake. And staying well hydrated is important, as creatine increases water storage inside the muscle.
So let's look at some race prep nutrition.
For long course racing, carbohydrate availability matters. That's where carb loading can help. But keep it simple. Increase your carbs, reduce fibre and fat in about the last 24 to 36 hours before your race. This isn't the time for nutrition experiments. Breakfast should be carb forward, familiar, and eaten about 3 to 4 hours before your race start.
And again, nothing new on race day. Which brings us to a good real world example. I've got a 10k race tomorrow, and while it's obviously shorter than a triathlon, the principles are the same. Tonight I'll be prioritising carbs, keeping fibre low, and then tomorrow morning it's a simple, familiar breakfast. Nothing fancy.
And that's a great point. Nutrition principles scale with duration, but the logic stays the same. In long course triathlon, carbohydrate delivery is usually the limiting factor.
We see this all the time. Athletes underfuel early on the bike and then try to play catch up later when it's already too late.
For many athletes, in 70.3, around 60 to 90 grams per hour of carb need to be consumed on the bike. The bike drives the day, the run is damage control.
And that's supported by research showing finish times correlate with carb and fluid intake, particularly in the long course Ironman racing.
When we talk about carbohydrate intake in triathlon, the key thing is to understand that carbs aren't just fuel, they're load management. The right intake supports performance, but it also reduces the physiological stress.
And that's why you'll see the different ranges depending on the session type. Easy sessions don't need race level fueling, but as duration and intensity increase, carbohydrate intake becomes non-negotiable.
For longer or harder sessions, and especially on race day, research consistently shows better performance when athletes consume somewhere between 60 and 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And some well-trained athletes will consume even more.
But this isn't a target you jump straight to. Higher intake really relies on what we call multiple transportable carbohydrates, usually glucose and fructose, and importantly, on a gut that's been trained to tolerate them.
That's why we're so big on practicing this in training. If you wait until race day to try high carb intake, you're gambling with your gut.
And practically, it's not about perfection, it's about consistency. Starting early, spreading intake evenly, and choosing forms you know work for you.
So when you're looking at these numbers, don't think, how much can I force down? Think instead, what level of intake lets me ride well and run well later.
Because in long course triathlon, it's not the bike fueling that matters most, it's how that bike fueling sets you up for the run.
You can generally tolerate more fuel on the bike. On the run, you'll usually need to lower your concentration take smaller sips and more frequent intake.
If you're blowing up on the run, it's worth checking what you're doing on the bike first.
There are two big hydration traps: over drinking and under drinking.
So over drinking increases hyponatremia, which is low salt or sodium, and under drinking leads to a performance drop through dehydration. Sodium can help comfort and fluid retention, but it doesn't fix over drinking.
Sodium is important, but it's not the magic fix many athletes think it is. If you're a salty sweater or racing in the heat, sodium can help with comfort and fluid retention, but this will be entirely dependent on what type of sweater you are, whether you're heavy or light. This will influence how much sodium you actually need.
So you can go and do sweat tests, and they're out there, and athletes can then complete
Sodium is important, but it's not the magic fix many athletes think it is. If you're a salty sweater or racing in the heat, sodium can help with comfort and fluid retention, but this will be entirely dependent on what type of sweater you are. Are you heavy or are you light? This will influence how much sodium you actually need.
So there's sweat tests out there that athletes can complete, and that will give you a good idea of whether you're a heavy sweater or not. And if we're being really scientific, also how much sodium you lose in that sweat, as that is completely individual as well.
So the goal is simple: personalise your intake and aim for balance.
So race day nutrition is very different to training nutrition. It's not the time for variety or experimentation. On race day, we're looking for predictable, repeatable delivery of carbohydrates and fluids.
For most athletes, that means sports drinks and gels as their foundation, because they're easy to quantify and they're easy to plan for. Sports drinks work well early in the race when appetite is good, but as fatigue builds, concentration and palatability become important. Gels are efficient and they're portable, but they need to be timed properly with your fluids, otherwise they're a common cause of stomach issues. Whilst chews and real food might still have a role early on in the bike for some athletes, but as the intensity and duration increase, tolerance usually drops.
So the guiding principle for race day is simplicity. Use what you've practiced, reduce the decision making, and focus on the execution of your race.
So this is where we start to differentiate athletes: conservative starters versus trained guts.
If you're GI sensitive or newer to long course racing, conservative fueling often produces better results than chasing high numbers.
And experienced athletes who've trained their gut can push higher carb intakes, but only if they've practiced it. It's better to finish wanting more than to shut the gut down. And the bike tends to set up the run, so you need to fuel it properly. If you want to, take a moment to screenshot this page so you've got it for later, and then you can use it to plan your next race. Now let's look at that post-race and post-training recovery.
Recovery nutrition isn't about indulgence, it's about preparing to train again.
Carbs plus protein soon after a long or hard session, then repeat protein intake across the day.
We keep recovery simple. Fluids replaced, 25 to 40 grams of protein per meal, carbs matched to training load, and sleep and routine are protected.
Most nutrition problems aren't complicated, they're repeat mistakes.
Underfueling long rides, practicing nothing until race day, over drinking to be safe, and too much fibre pre-race and not eating after training.
If you fix those, you're already ahead of most age groupers.
If you want support building a nutrition strategy that actually fits your training,
head to sccoachingtraining.com or drop us a question in the comments. Good
luck with your training and race smart.